You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode number 80 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. I have a rather fascinating glass of rye whiskey sitting next to me, y'all, and I am not going to drink this alone. So let's get this show started. Grab a glass, fill it up, and let's say cheers. All right. I am drinking whiskey today, rye whiskey to be specific, and I'm really impressed by it. It's from Whiskey Acres, which is a distillery in, get this, DeKalb, Illinois. They call themselves a seed-to-spirit distillery, which essentially means that every aspect of their process, from laying to fertilizer to the seeds, the grains, all of it, harvest, it occurs right on site. Now, I've tried their bourbon. I feel like it's a little too young, but that's why I'm talking about the rye today, because it is excellent. And it is one of the very few ryes that I will just drink straight instead of mixed in a cocktail. Now, this has a very high rye mash bill. It's about 75% rye, 25% corn. And it hasn't really been aged very long, I think maybe a year. So again, this is a very young whiskey, but it's really good. When you first smell it, you kind of get this buttered popcorn sort of smell to it. Now, I've heard others compare it to things like barbecue pork. And I get it a little bit because there's this sort of smoky and sweet scent to it. And then when you taste it, y'all, it's lovely. It's got a little bit of honey to it, which gives it that sweet, smooth sort of flavor. A little bit of fruit to it. Now, the one thing I don't like is that on the back end, it's got a little bit of clove, which kind of gives it kind of a medicinal sort of atmosphere, but it's really faint. Now, I admit, I may never have grabbed this bottle if I hadn't had a sample offered to me at the liquor store. And I am so glad I tasted it because, y'all, Whiskey Acres Rye, quite good. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks here at the Rant Ranch. What with the weather getting warmer and all that, my guy and I are definitely getting a little restless and a little itchy. In fact, it was just the other day, actually, when someone on Twitter sent me a message and asked if there was any place left in the general tri-state area that my guy and I were still welcome to visit this summer. And I had to give it a little bit of thought because, quite honestly, they're few and far between. If we haven't caused some sort of ruckus there, then we've been, blacklisted somehow. And the same can be said now for our local diner. Now, I feel the need to preface this story by saying that, generally speaking, my guy is a very good dresser. He and I both like to get dressed up. Even if we are just hanging around the house, we do our best to make sure we look good. It's just something we do. However, we both have articles of clothing that have outstayed their welcome in our wardrobes. For me, it's a pair of Flashdance-era leg warmers. Oh, I love these things. They are full of holes and runs, and they barely stay on my legs anymore. The elastic is so worn out. I could douse these things in Clorox and set them on fire, and they still wouldn't be clean. But I don't care. I love them. I will wear them when it is midnight on a Saturday and my guy and I are laying on the couch eating nachos and watching horror movies. That's the kind of leg warmers they are. As for my guy, like I think most guys do, he's got a couple of t-shirts that are questionable at best. And there's one in particular that I absolutely despise. It was given to him by a band member a couple of years ago, and it looks exactly like something a band member would wear. Quite honestly, it looks like something a frat boy would wear to a kegger. It's that kind of t-shirt. Now, my guy knows how much I despise this shirt, so he only brings it out every so often when he feels the need to deliberately annoy me. Which is why I'd pretty much forgotten that t-shirt existed until the other day. It was a lazy sort of day. My guy and I didn't have a whole lot going on, so we decided we wanted to go out and have a late breakfast. We hop in the car and head over to our local diner, which is everything a diner should be. They serve breakfast all day long. It's just a little bit greasy. It's right off of an expressway, so it picks up tons of truckers. Y'all, the food is awesome. But the best part of this place is that they bake everything there. All of their bread, made from scratch, there in the morning. And even better than that, cookies. Oh, y'all, they have these gigantic cookies that are about the size of my head. So good. So I was really excited about this breakfast. We've been going to this place for years, so we know everybody in there. It's like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in there. We walk in, we're waving to everybody. We have our own table. That's how often we go there. Now, I've already sat down and started perusing the menu when I look up and I see my guy is still standing. He is clearly waiting for me to take notice of him. So I look up, I meet his eyes, and I acknowledge his existence. And that is when he starts to slowly unzip his hoodie. He's easing that zipper down one thread at a time as if he is Magic fucking Mike. He slowly shrugs one shoulder out, then the other, pulls his arms out. And as he straightens himself up, a ray of sunshine hits him directly in the chest, and it is then that I notice he's wearing the shirt. The one shirt out of all of the shirts in his closet that I hate, he is wearing there in public. Now let me try to describe this t-shirt for you. Picture this, if you will. Standard, classic, black t-shirt, short sleeves, crew neck. But that is where the ordinary ends, because emblazoned across the chest in neon letters is the phrase, mayonnaise cannon. And depicted in the center like a glorious cartoon is exactly what you would expect. A cannon full of fucking mayonnaise. This is what I'm going to have to look at while we are eating our breakfast. And he is just so pleased, so happy with himself for his little prank, and I gotta hand it to him, he kinda had me on it. So he sits down, aims his mayonnaise cannon right at me and says, "What do you think?" And all I can say is, "Bravo, my love, you got me. Now, can we order our breakfast? Because I don't want to have to look at that thing any longer than I have to." Now, this is not an inconspicuous t-shirt. It is rather loud. Still, I'm an adult. I've had worse things pointed at me. I can handle it. But apparently the woman sitting a couple of tables back couldn't. Now, we've never seen this woman before, have no idea who she is, but she strides on up to our table and says, "Excuse me, that shirt is disgusting. And it is offensive to my children. I must insist that you cover it up." Well, my guy gets that stubborn sort of look that he does and then grins at the woman and says, "You know, I'm not feeling particularly chilly, so I don't believe I will be putting my hoodie back on." This just serves to enrage her, and she turns her sights on me. And she says, "How can you just sit there looking at that? You should be so offended. Make him put his hoodie on." Well, this puts me in an awkward position. I hate that shirt. Hate it. Now, mind you, I'm not offended by it. I could care less what it depicts. I hate that shirt because I think it's stupid. I hate that shirt for the exact same reason that I cannot tolerate the Three Stooges. It's obnoxious. But now, I'm about to take a stand for all the mayonnaise cannons in the world because, goddammit, nobody messes with my guy, and nobody tells me what to be offended at. So I turn around and survey her poor, offended children who are gleefully coloring on the walls with crayons. And I turn back to her and I say, "You know, your kids don't look old enough to read. So unless you sat there and explained the concept behind this t-shirt to them, I think they're going to be just fine." And then I smiled sweetly and said, "Now, if you will excuse us, we have breakfast coming." She stomps off in a huff, and I look at my guy and I say, "Really? I hope you're happy with yourself." And of course he was. He had no concerns in the world. As far as he was concerned, that mayonnaise cannon t-shirt is a ride on the fun train right into Happy Town. But our little scenario here, it's not over. Things like this never end quite that simply. Because the next thing we know, we have the manager joining us at our table. Now, like I said, we're regulars. We know him, he knows us. So it's casual, and he says, "Guys, we got ourselves a little bit of a problem here. I would consider it a personal favor if you would put your hoodie on." And my guy gets that stubborn look again and says, "No, I would really rather not." And the manager just kind of sinks down in the chair a little bit as if he was expecting that reaction. And that's when I climb onto my soapbox and take a stand for all the mayonnaise cannons on the planet. I say this is an issue of freedom of expression. No one can tell anyone in this restaurant what they can and cannot wear. Oh, I'm on a tear, y'all. But the manager was having none of that. He could care less about my little crusade for freedom of expression. And he says, look, guys, you're great customers. I don't want to have to ask you to leave. I'll make you an offer. How about you put your hoodie on and I'll buy your breakfast? Oh, no, that won't do, I say. Our principles, our convictions cannot be bought and sold like a commodity. Now, I don't know exactly what that meant, but it really felt like it sounded good at the time. And the manager again interrupts me and says, all right, put the hoodie on, I'll buy your breakfast, and I'll give you a bag of cookies. Well, that stops my little crusade dead in its tracks, and I look up and I say, cookies? Chocolate chip cookies? The manager nods his head. Right out of the oven, chocolate chip cookies? He nods his head again. I pause for a moment, but there really wasn't any debating the offer. I look right at my guy and I say, baby, put your hoodie on. Mama wants some cookies. Well, my guy didn't have any choice then. He put his hoodie on, and true to the manager's word, he comped our breakfast, and he brought over a bag full of delicious, warm, ooey-gooey chocolate chip cookies. Pure heaven in a bag. So we finish our breakfast and we make our way out of the restaurant to the car, and my guy's looking a little sheepish because his prank clearly had gone farther than he had intended. As for me, through all the sweetness of these delicious baked goods, I couldn't help but feel just a little bit unsettled. For all of my so-called principles and convictions, clearly I can be bought for nothing more than a free breakfast and a bag full of cookies. And with that, I'm going to suck down some whiskey. Hang on, y'all. Ah, whiskey. This whiskey is so easy to drink. I've got it on the rocks. It is heavenly. Of course, for as delicious as all of my whiskeys and bourbons are, they certainly seem to be the cause of a lot of my problems. Now, I've mentioned in the past that I have issues maintaining friendships, and the same can be said for my guy and I as a couple. Because for as hard as it is for one person to make a new friend, well, of course, add more people into that equation, and it is just infinitely impossible for couples to make new friends. And if you've ever been on one of those awkward first couple dates, you know how excruciating the process can be. So that's why, for the few friends that my guy and I have as a couple, we treasure our time with them. We actually had a little couples getaway not too long ago with some friends of ours who live out of state. Y'all, I found the most perfect resort for us to get together at. It was perfectly equidistant between our two home states, but the best part is that this resort used to be a Playboy club in the 60s. I cannot think of a more perfect place for two couples prone to debauchery to hang out than a Playboy club. And oh, this place did not disappoint. I swear walking into it was like walking into a time warp. It was perpetually 1962 in there, right down to the glass-bottom swimming pool and the sunken seating areas where you could have fondue. Now, of course, this resort is trying to expand its demographic a little bit, so they're bringing in different kinds of entertainment to attract different crowds. The first night we were there, they had a daddy-daughter dance, which we stayed far, far away from. And the second night, well, there was a corporate event. Now, we had seen signs for this event throughout the resort for our stay and didn't really pay much attention to them until about 8 o'clock at night after we had been day drinking heavily. And it's about that point in time when it starts to seem absolutely silly to be paying for your cocktails when you can easily crash a corporate party and get free drinks. Now, throughout this story, I'm going to offer you some tips on how to effectively crash a corporate party so that you can learn from our experiences. And my first tip to share with you is that when you are swiping name tags, pay attention to the names on the tags. There was a table set up in one of the alcoves to the ballroom that had leftover name tags for people who clearly hadn't shown up for the event. Now, my guy is the most stealthy of us, So he got the honor of grabbing a couple of the name tags for us to use. Now, these kind of corporate events are rarely policed all that hard, but it definitely helps to give the appearance of belonging. Of the 4 tags that he grabbed, our friends got to play the parts of Hector and Maria. I got to be Claudia, and my guy was stuck with the name Mercedes. Had we been paying better attention, we would have noticed that all of our names had something in common. But this didn't become apparent to us until we were safely inside the event and caught one of the executives who was addressing the crowd, entirely in Spanish. Y'all, it would seem that we had managed to cross the Playboy border and crash a party for the Spanish-speaking chapter of the local direct sales company. Well, you can imagine that caused an emergency huddle with the 4 of us in the back of the room to determine if any of us happened to know any Spanish. Hector and my guy, who will forever be known as Mercedes, shrugged their shoulders. Now, my knowledge of Spanish is limited to Shakira song lyrics and what I've read on the back of tequila bottles, so I'm not going to be much help. And that left Maria. She'd taken some Spanish in college and felt reasonably confident that she could pull off casual conversation if needed. Which was good, because we quickly discovered that no one in that room spoke English, not even the Casey and the Sunshine tribute band, or for that matter, the bartender. Which brings me to tip number 2. Pace yourself at the free bar. This shindig wasn't especially fancy, so our bar options were limited to well liquor and box wine. Of course, we weren't paying for it, so we couldn't be particularly choosy. Still, that's not the tastiest of booze, so our inclination wasn't to savor it, but to swill it as quickly as humanly possible. I think we must have visited that bar 3 times in 30 minutes before the bartender suspended our drinking privileges. That left us in something of a dangerous position. Had we not been drunk, or at least thinking a little bit more clearly, we would have realized that what we should have done is stayed in the back of the room and waited for the bartender's shift to end. But we were at that perfect apex of having had a lot to drink, but not enough to weigh us down. The end result being a profound sense of restlessness, which couldn't have been timed worse, because just as we were debating what mischief to get into, the band started playing. Now, my third tip is something of a no-brainer. Just blend in. Unfortunately, nothing appeals to a good drunk more than the festive sounds of a Casey and the Sunshine tribute band. So there really wasn't any question of what we had to do. The dance floor was calling, and we were going to answer it. Well, sort of. Hector and Maria are talented dancers, so much so that they often participate in local ballroom dancing competitions. As for my guy, Mercedes, and I, well, quite honestly, we have zero business being on a dance floor. Despite our best efforts, we just can't seem to get our shit together enough to find rhythm or dance in unison. Now, I admit this is mostly my fault, but still, we love to try. So Hector and Maria are pulling out their best reenactment of the final scene of Dirty Dancing, and my guy and I were doing our best to match their moves. But after stumbling through a turn and a near-fatal dip, we decided that if we couldn't match them for technique, we were going to beat them with style. All of us lock eyes as if it were the OK Corral. No words had to be spoken. We knew what was coming. A dance-off. A no-moves-barred dance-off between 2 drunk couples who really should have known better. It was spectacular. Hector and Maria would throw out an elaborate combination of salsa funk steps, and my guy and I, we'd counter with some bastardization of moves that we'd ripped off from Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. Hector and Maria would shimmy and shake and do a lift, and my guy broke out the robot while I started grinding on his leg as if I was auditioning for a Motley Crue video in 1986. This continued for the whole of the Spanish-language version of Shake Your Booty. Had we been paying attention to our surroundings, we would have noticed that somewhere in the midst of our dance fever-style gyrations, the entire dance floor had cleared. But when the song ended, there was no applause. There was no Danny Terrio to shake our hands, There were only dozens upon dozens of disapproving glares from a crowd of people who obviously realized we were not supposed to be there. Which brings me to my final tip, and it's a big one. Always have an exit strategy. My inclination was to run. It seemed like the easiest thing to do. But we had several problems. First, I needed my shoes. I'm not the most graceful gal on the planet, so I had taken them off before hitting the dance floor. And I was willing to risk finding out the hard way if this former Playboy club had a holding cell in its basement, because there was no way in hell I was leaving without my Jimmy Choos. Now, our second problem was that Maria was over in the corner quietly vomiting into a potted plant. Clearly, the 3 shots of tequila and the swan dive she'd done did not mix. But our biggest problem was a man with a very official-looking name tag striding toward us looking really, really pissed. He immediately laid into us in what I can only assume was Spanish, and Maria wasn't exactly in any condition to respond. Hector and Mercedes just stood there looking confused, which left me to deal with this guy. I don't know Spanish, but I had to do something to save our asses, so I coughed up the only 2 vaguely Spanish-sounding phrases that came to my stupid, drunken little brain. I looked right at that gentleman, and with what is likely the world's worst accent, said, "La cabeza de vaca, donde el baño?" And I said it just like that. He was so staggered by what I'd said, it gave me and my amigos just the right amount of time to grab our shit and cross the border before we could be kicked out. Later that night, at a bar at the far, far end of the resort, as far away from that ballroom as we could possibly get, we regrouped over cocktails and fondue. Maria had made a miraculous recovery and was gamely enjoying that massive pot of cheesy goodness with impressive abandon. So we're talking and we're laughing about our night, but the big question from the group was just what the hell I had said to that guy. Well, y'all, all I can do is raise up my glass right now and translate 2 Spanish phrases that every good drunk should have in their toolbox. You have the head of a cow, and where is the bathroom? And with that, I'm going to drink some whiskey. Whiskey. Well, y'all, I think that is just about enough out of me. Now, don't forget to head on over to theunwritablерant.com and sign up for my newsletter. You'll get all sorts of details about the show, access to interviews before anybody else can hear them, along with special little videos that I'll be making along the way. I'm going to go finish up what's left of my whiskey. Hope you all have a great week. I'll chat with you again next. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweet as taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You